Well, take a listen to this. A new law aimed at gun owners in California would track every bullet that they fire with a traceable stamp. The only problem is that gun makers say that they can't get the technology to work. And so far, 0 guns have been able to meet the new requirements. So is this really necessary in terms of law, or is it a covert attack on your Second Amendment rights? Joining us now is Larry Keane, Senior Vice President, Assistant Secretary, and General Counsel for the National Shooting Sports Foundation. Larry, thanks for joining us here today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So what are your thoughts on this stamping? Because the group bringing this says, hey, we have nearly half of the crimes involving guns go unsolved. This would be the solution, you say?
Well, in concept, it might be an aid to law enforcement, but in reality, the technology simply doesn't work. It's impossible for the manufacturers to comply with the requirements of the law. And so as a consequence, California has a slow-motion gun ban. California will become like Cuba is to cars. Citizens in California will only be able to get old models because new models of handguns cannot be introduced to the marketplace in California because the manufacturers can't comply with this law. And law enforcement doesn't support it either.
Law enforcement does not support it.
ATF has said, the Fraternal Order of Police have said, and the California Police Chiefs Association have all said this ought to be studied further before it's mandated. And in fact, the patent holder, the inventor himself, says this should not be mandated into law and ought to be studied further. And all the peer-reviewed independent studies that have been done, including by the University of California, Davis, and by the National Research Council, all reach the same conclusion. The technology doesn't work. It doesn't produce the information reliably, consistently, and legibly onto the cartridge casing, and that the markings on the firing pin is very shallow, half the diameter of human hair. Elizabeth, you can remove those markings with a nail file in your purse.
They're that easily removed?
Yes.
Let me ask you this. So in saying if a piece of arm does not have this micro-stamping and the manufacturers cannot manufacture a gun that meets the requirements, then they can't sell them, then a person who wants a gun can't get it. So that's why you say this is a slow road to crushing your Second Amendment right, correct?
Absolutely. And under federal law, if you are a resident of California, you cannot buy a handgun anywhere else but California. You can't buy a handgun in another state. So if all the residents of all the other 49 states can buy the new, improved, and better models of pistols, but if you're a citizen of California, you can't. You can only buy the older models, and no new models of pistols have been introduced into California since this law became effective, and no new models will be introduced into California because the manufacturers, it's impossible to comply with the requirements of the law.
Seems almost unconstitutional at this point to some. Let me ask you this. So those that say, hey, those unsolved crimes, this is the way to solve it. We have too many that go without answers. This seems to be the right solution, and you say there's a better way and it needs more time to be tested?
Well, we have said consistently, and we told the California legislature when they were considering this bill, is we would support a federal study to try to find out whether this technology can be made to work the way the patent holder conceives it. But the reality is it doesn't do that now. And even if it did, I don't know that this would actually help law enforcement very much, because the average gun that's traced as being used in crime was originally sold at retail over 11 years prior to the gun being used in a crime. So you're talking about, almost 12 years before you get any useful information. And so it's really not going to assist law enforcement. And most guns used in crime are stolen guns anyway.
Well, it's a huge sacrifice in terms of constitutional right on something that is yet to be proven.
And there is a lawsuit pending now in federal court to declare it unconstitutional, and there's a state court action to declare the law invalid because it can't be complied with.
Larry, we want to thank you for being with us today, breaking this all down.
Thank you for having us.
Larry Keane, everybody.